You know, oftentimes our media gives you an effect without necessarily a cause, meaning they would explain something that is taking place in the world but doesn't necessarily explain why that thing is taking place. Oftentimes, that is to hide your government's actions, meaning you want to remain virtuous. And so when you're talking about belligerence from another nation, you don't necessarily point out that it is something that you are doing that is instigating and is pissing them off. Enter China. Xi Jinping, while addressing the troops, this is Business Insider, he tells them, I'll just read it. Chinese President Xi Jinping asked the People's Liberation Army Marine Corps troops to maintain high alert and to focus their energy on preparing for war. His remarks came as a visit to a military base in Guangdong, according to state-run media Xinhua. According to Xi Jinping, it is currently necessary to clarify the roadmap and construction of the 14th five-year plan, and the armed forces keep the current situation in mind. He emphasized that the naval branch of the PLA plays an important role in safeguarding China's national sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity, especially when it comes to maritime rights and interests. Prepare for war. Prepare for war. That is strong. And he is the Chinese president. That is the first or second largest economy, depending upon how you judge it. That's a big deal because it means that China, whatever it wants to be, recognizes that it needs to have some capacity to protect itself. Now, why is China saying this, and why is he emphasizing this to such a degree? The United States has been selling weapon systems to Taiwan. Now, Taiwan is a touchy subject, kind of like Hong Kong, but kind of not. When the communists won, the Republic of China fled to Taiwan. And there was this push and pull over which one was actually China. But of course, if you can look at the two places on the map, China is China. But China considers Taiwan a province of China, basically a rogue province. And so it went with this notion of adhering to a one China policy. The United States, especially under the Trump administration, have been flagrantly violating that notion and been sending diplomats and basically envoys to have conversations with Taiwan. On top of that, selling Taiwan weapons and multiple weapon systems, in addition to military escapades in the South China Sea in the South China Sea. Those are disputed areas. China has been building up militarily in that area. But, of course, whatever they're building up doesn't match with the amount of force that the U.S. has in that region. Consider for the moment the amount of weapons that we have in Japan and military bases that are in Japan. Consider the military bases that are in, or at the very least, the weapons that we've been selling to Taiwan, who would, of course, be an ally if there was any kind of conflict. I guess I'm making the point that we have been provocative. Even the military exercises that we've been running in, again, areas that China considers disputed territory. That level of brinksmanship has cost. I mean, consider for the moment what the United States does to protect its territory and protect its borders. And it is not like China has this massive, massive military spread out across the globe. Oh, no, that's us. That's us. We have the massive military spread across the globe. It seems that there is no recognition of spheres of influence, meaning the U.S. takes the position that there would never be another Soviet Union or another force that can rival us in the way that the Soviet Union rivaled and competed with the United States. Let's say, I suspect, the issue wasn't the fact that the Soviet Union was a power. It was more so that it was a contrary form of organization and operation from the standpoint of an economic system that wasn't a capitalist economy. And the U.S. is looking at China as a secondary competitor. And this world has become less unipolar and more multipolar in the way that you have these kind of spheres of influence, with Russia seemingly being a peacemaker around the world at this point, China being an economy and economic force, and I have to be honest, the U.S. seemingly being a force of destabilization, with this notion of getting its hands on resources and the geopolitics of trying to dominate the world. If you don't recognize that a country has a sphere of influence, around its own borders, then yeah, you're going to come at odds with those countries. When China is making this point of saying prepare for war, he's basically saying that at any point there could be a flashpoint in which China would have to defend its territorial borders, or area to which it believes is theirs. And so you have this issue with how do you resolve this when you have a belligerent nation. It's fascinating because if you want to be something, say for the moment that China just says, look, we just want to expand, we want to focus on our economy, we want to get rid of poverty, we don't have these aspirational goals of having military bases around the world and all of that stuff, that's not what we're looking to do. But the U.S. says, by definition, if you're going to do that, economic might brings a certain degree of military might, especially if that country decides to change over their economy. We know that because that's what the United States did when we converted ourselves into a military machine at World War II. We had weapons on both sides of the globe, including arming the other nations. So we know that that could take place. We know that those things can be done. And from our standpoint, if they're going to have an economy like that, that diminishes us. If they're going to have an economy that may have the ability to have military, that's going to diminish us, especially if they run counter to our interests in other areas of the globe, which almost they will, because they have a different way of looking at the world than we do. They're not playing. Those countries have been in vicious wars in the lifetime of many people who are still alive right now. And they are not playing. To put this in perspective of why the strong language from Xi Jinping, this is Consortium News. In 2015, the Obama administration authorized 2 freedom of navigation operations, and 3 freedom of navigation operations were authorized in 2016. In the spring of 2017, now Trump ramps this up massively. He ramps up sending diplomats to Taiwan. He ramps up sending weapon systems to Taiwan. And he ramps up these navigation exercises that are running through the South China Sea. In spring of 2017, he stopped it right. But by summer 2017, the United States started them with 6 freedom of navigation operations in 2017 and 5 operations in 2018. A record number of U.S. freedom of navigation operations in South China Sea, a total of 9, were conducted in 2019. In 2020, the Trump administration has dramatically increased the number of freedom of navigation missions. The first FONOP in 2020 was set January 25, with the littoral combat ship, the USS Montgomery, sailing past Chinese claims in the Spratly Islands. During that operation, China responded by sending 2 fighter bombers close to the USS Montgomery. You must understand why this takes place. This is tit for tat. If you are able to take an operation and I cannot respond to you, does that not mean that you could take another operation? Meaning, why didn't I respond? Did I respond because I just didn't want to? Did I respond because I didn't need to? Or did I respond because I didn't have capacity to respond? And the moment that your opponent finds that you no longer have capacity to respond, you've allowed an open hand. The person can do anything. When Russia was in a difficult strait, the United States could have an open hand in Iraq. There was nothing to intervene in what the United States was doing. At that point, it was a unipolar world. In this case, this is the same thing, tit for tat. The United States is taking an action. China is not taking any shit off the United States. China takes an action in response to the United States' actions. Yes, it gets provocative. It's tit for tat. It's the same thing that was taking place in a trade war. But the point is that tit for tat stops the moment that the aggressor stops. tit for tat continues the moment that the aggressor continues. It's an escalation that only goes up into the degree of the opponent, with the notion that you're not necessarily trying to forward the progression. You just want to inflict pain as much as they inflict pain. Or in this case, as provocative as they're provocative. And that's exactly what this is. Two countries being very provocative with one another. But clearly, between the two, the U.S. doesn't belong. In 2020, the Trump administration, right, we did that one January 25th, right? In April 2020, in 2 consecutive days, freedom of navigation operations, the guided missile destroyer USS Berry sailed through the Parcel Islands, and the guided missile cruiser USS Bunker Hill navigated through the Spratly Island chain in the South China Sea. In early January 2020, the United States sent 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, the USS Nimitz and USS Ronald Reagan Strike Group, to conduct dual carrier operations in the South China Sea. A carrier strike group is composed of roughly 7,500 personnel, an aircraft carrier, at least 1 cruiser, a destroyer squadron of at least 2 destroyer or frigates, a carrier air wing, 65 to 70 aircraft. A carrier strike group can also include submarines, attack logistic ships, and supply ships. And another major naval show force exercise in the Pacific in August 2020, the United States held its Rim of the Pacific naval war practice, traditionally the world's largest maritime war maneuver, with 25,000 personnel, 200 ships, and 25 nations. This year, COVID-19 concerns reduced FRIMPAC to 20 ships and naval outforce from 10 countries: South Korea, Canada, Australia, Japan, the Philippines, Singapore, New Zealand, Brunei, France, and the United States. The month-long war practice was reduced from 1 month to 2 weeks. I hope you get my point. I mean, there's more, but I hope you get my point. These maneuvers were basically being carried through territory in South China Sea, territory that is disputed, that China claims as its own waters. Now, again, it's disputed. There are multiple nations that claim it, but China has been building lily pad islands and those type of things. But again, that's to defend what they consider to be their own. We would do the same. China's Navy did not respond to the United States war practice in the Western Pacific. Let's see, go and answer it. China sent its own aircraft carriers. It sent its own responses, building the lily pad islands. They're not going to tolerate. They're not going to tolerate this. Meaning, this is not going to be something. It seems like this builds to a flashpoint, and the question becomes, what's that flashpoint? Is it where there's a mistake? Which, keep in mind, that could take place where there's an accident that takes place, a ship is bombed, one retaliates. Look, this is, at some point, you have to recognize that other countries exist, and other countries have areas to which they consider to be their sphere of influence. And if you're going to impinge upon that sphere of influence, you're going to naturally, organically, bring yourself into one conflict after the next. And if you've noticed, the United States has been at war or at odds for the entirety, or at the very least, for the entirety of my knowledge of this history. I'm going to end this here. I just wanted to point this out because it's a big story. And there are like multiple flashpoints around the world right now. There's this one where, and this is not the first time he said this, by the way. There's, he's made mention to the Elysian Gap. This notion that when you have a upcoming a country and a larger or dominant country, that there's a friction naturally between them because the dominant country inherently wants to remain dominant, in which case the only way to get past it is for the smaller country to expand its military rapidly so it can catch up what a dominant country wouldn't necessarily attack. I mean, I can't necessarily say they're wrong, but this is a logic they're going by. The other story from Consortium News is this one. This was another one, good one. It goes into the conflict in the South China Sea. It gives an amazing explanation of it. yeah, I end it here. I will say like, share, and of course, subscribe. Thanks all. Oh, wait, before I go. I said I was gonna read. I missed a super chat in the last video apparently, and I told Port Film Co-op that I will read it. And Port Film Co-op, I remembered that I said that, so I got you, bro. Let's see. Laptop is real, or Biden would deny it. Game over. Yes. Yes. He's talking about the laptop, the Hunter Biden thing. Look, I don't know if the laptop is real. That may or may not be real. But if the email is real, it's the thing that matters. Now the catch becomes, because I can believe that a political operation gets a laptop, into a particular spot in order to kind of get the stuff out into the media without their hands on it. But if the email is real, we're talking about something real, then yeah, that looks bad. And so that's the question. And yeah, he hasn't. I mean, that denial is flimsy weak. Like tepid is an understatement. So I end it here. Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks all.